but in exchange they had to promise not to organize any institutional structure, no branches. So there are no branches in China, although they very often give relief, and they have a rather good reputation with Chinese. I remember talking to some cadre way out in Gansu, I think, anyway, in the middle of nowhere, saying, and telling him about this, and he was saying, oh, Zheng Yan, the name of the nun who leads this group, she's kind of like Taiwan's Lei Feng, so you China people will get the reference, and for the rest of you, ask later. So I think this is what's going on, is this total reworking, and I think there's an important lesson in globalization there and how it works, that it's not simply, we tend to think of it simply as water flowing down a mountain, you know, from Hollywood or Wall Street or wherever to everywhere. And it's not. I mean, this is really a story of how all of these ideas of what charity is, what is the good, get reworked. In this case, in Taipei, or even not in Taipei, but in Hualien, this little city on the East Coast. All right. Let me go rather more quickly through the other two areas. The issue of scale. So again, I thought the small groups would be better at mobilizing social capital, the big groups better at mobilizing the state. In fact, that wasn't very well formulated either. And the reason is almost all the big groups are organized in branches that go down to the local level. So if you look at them at the local level, there's actually a lot of social capital. Right? So it'd be like saying, in the US, the Presbyterian Church, it's a great big national organization, it must have thin social capital. I mean, in a sense, that's true. What ties some local Presbyterian to the top leadership is very thin. But if you look locally at the one church, there can be really thick social capital at that. And that's kind of what I was seeing here. And also the small ones that didn't have the big thing at all, often, in fact, were able to mobilize other kinds of resources. One rather well-studied temple in China, the one that has the Arboretum, was very successful in getting national attention and even international NGO support from a Japanese NGO for constructing that. And that's just a local temple with no broader ties. This Malaysian temple that I mentioned, that was the house of the Kapitan, that's the same kind of thing, right? It's just the local religious and charitable group. Charitable, for instance, it ran the local cemetery for the Chinese. But it also tied directly into the state, to the Malaysian, the British, and then the Malaysian state. Instead, I think scale does have an influence in two related areas. One is, you see a somewhat different vision of charity. From a more traditional Chinese one, if you look at the purely local groups, the temples especially, there's a pattern in what they do. They, if there's a poor person, you know, somebody, the breadwinner gets really sick and can't work, or they're desperate for money, like something like that. They'll help out in a case like that. The old person at Chinese New Year's, they'll give some money. It's ad hoc, you know, kind of emergency related. There's no follow through. In a sense, it's pre-modern charity. The newer stuff, and here again, compassion relief as the model, is very different. The newer model is go out and identify who's needy. Survey everyone, census everyone, find the poor. Then we bring them help, and then we follow through. Because we want their life to be better. We don't just want to solve the emergency of today. We want to figure out how to change their life. So it's a much more modern, social worky kind of image of the sort of aid that should be provided. And we see it's not just that movement, but the nursing homes I mentioned in Changzhou, which has both Christian and Buddhist-oriented nursing homes. That's the same idea, that we're helping anybody who needs help. That's one thing that I think is a regular difference. The other one is gender, actually. It's the big organizations where women are important. So Compassion Relief, the leader is a nun, a woman. 70% of the followers are women. The second biggest one, again, millions of people, Buddha Lake Mountain. Again, there are branches all over the US. The leaders are men, but most of the people who get brought into Buddhism are women. Again, so it's again, the actual group is dominated by women. If you look at local temples, who's on local temple committees, for instance? It's men. It's almost entirely men. And this is true in China, it's true in Taiwan, it's true in Malaysia, it's true of all of these. And in fact, this is related to the social capital thing, but not in a way they usually talk about. What it reminds us is that local social capital isn't an entirely even-handed thing. Some people benefit more than others. Local social capital was male-dominated, right? This was Chinese tradition. In addition to other kinds of inequalities of age, of wealth, right, all the usual sociological things we would expect, but let me leave it with gender here. It's very difficult at that level to get away from those traditional forms of domination. But when you move up, when you thin out the social capital by moving up to a national level, new possibilities get opened up. And one of those new possibilities, well, in this case, was new images of what women could do. And it fit, you know, it fit with this Buddhist, this bodhisattva, nurture the world. Right before I had love for my children, and now I take that same love to the entire world. This is the imagery that they like. It's a very feminized kind of imagery. So even when men do it, they have to give up macho behaviors, smoking, drinking, right? This kind of stuff they have to stop doing. All right, and briefly again on the state-society relations. Here, the obvious hypothesis, which actually wasn't mine because I knew it was wrong, but the obvious hypothesis was the state failure, what's called the state failure hypothesis. That is, when do you get social groups doing public good? It's when the state can't do its responsibilities, right? When you have a failing state, a weak state. It can't fulfill its responsibilities, and so the local people take over. And that was obviously not the case. Weak state does not describe any of the three states that I was talking about. You know, Malaysia had a bit of a hard time during the Asian financial crisis, but actually Malaysia didn't do that badly compared to many of its neighbors. Taiwan didn't do badly at all compared to Korea or Japan. And China, because the currency was kind of protected, did the best of all out of that. So that wasn't that big a deal in these three cases. And in other ways, I can't see calling any of these weak states. So that's not it. Rather, in the case of Taiwan and the People's Republic, I think what you have in both cases is a response to greater political openness. That is, I kind of took my story up to 1978, right? So this very secularized image of what religion is supposed to be. What happens after that? Well, in Taiwan, it's really obvious. What happens after that is democratization. So the change as far as religion is concerned is, instead of a politician standing in Taipei saying, you people have to stop doing all these rituals. It wastes money that could be used for buying jets, you know, to protect us. You know, you leave these pigs out in the hot sun all day long and then you eat it. You're all going to get sick and die. Blocking traffic, right? This kind of thing, and you people who know China know that this is a very familiar kind of discourse about popular religion. So that kind of finger wagging you do when you're not running for office against those people who want to put a pig out in the hot sun all day, right? As soon as Taiwan democratized, you know what? Where does social capital lie in a village in China? Kinship, temple. I mean, those are the two reservoirs of local social capital. So you can't exactly go to the lineage and say, yeah, I'm a brother Wang when your name is Chun, right? You can't do that. But you can go to the temple and burn incense, and they do.